Should I switch to English, I believe, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. This is my great pleasure to open the debate. My name is Vadim Zheltovsky. I have this privilege to be a co-organizer of the event as a scientific supervisor of Students Association that is studying the international institutions at the Faculty of Political Science and International Studies at University of Warsaw. I would like to express my sheer appreciation to European Union institutions, European Parliament representation, and European Commission representation for such a unique opportunity, their hospitality and always openness for cooperation with us, with young people, and share the expertise. Today's event is specific and has a very productive formula, I believe, because we will start with the expert debate, and we have distinguished experts with us, and I'm very grateful for their time, who will share the vision on European Union challenges in these turbulent times, as you could see from the title. Furthermore, there will be workshop part with students who would also take the arguments which they will hear today and share their reflections in the workshop part. Because one thing is clear for us today, that we have to make our judgment and opinion which is based on context. Context is very important, and I'm very much sure that we will have a lot of context after the first panel, and that will be very useful for us. Once again, many thanks for co-organizing this event and for being a part of it, to our dear experts, online and offline, and special thanks to Dr. Kinga Schlesinger for fantastic organization and initiative, hospitality, and always openness for cooperation with students, who I'm sure in this room we have future decision makers for EU, because we need EU and EU needs us. So at this positive moment, let me give the floor to my co-organizer, Dr. Schlesinger.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, here offline and also online, as we have participants via Facebook and YouTube. I would like to welcome you warmly in Europa Experience Multimedia Center in Warsaw. I would like to thank the co-organizers, Warsaw University, the faculty, and also the young students from the scientific circle in EU institutions. I would like also to thank Team Europe Direct Poland Network, that we can use these experts thanks to the courtesy of the European Commission representation in Poland. We find ourselves, as I mentioned, in Europa Experience. This is a great place where you can meet in an interactive way Europa. We have a panoramic cinema. We have also exhibition. We have photo booth. We have role-play game. So please make use of all these facilities. Whether you come here individually or as a group, you are most welcome. Today's debate takes place in the framework of Together.eu project. It's a pan-European project, not political nature. In Polish, it's wspólnie.eu, and I warmly encourage you to stay with us within this project, not only today but also further, and be active. Our debate is topical. As you know, today starts the European Parliament plenary session in Strasbourg, where the MEPs will be debating security issues, Ukraine, MFF. So I'm very glad that we have with us distinguished panelists. We have representative of the European Parliament, Mario Damen, with us. We will have soon Juan Ballesteros from the European Commission. We also have academia, Professor Skolimowska, Dr. Pachocka, and Dr. Marzena Guzweter. So I think it's a good mix. We'll have food for thought. And I would like to wish you an interesting debate. Thank you. And I pass the floor to Dr. Marzena Guzweter from the Team Europe Direct Poland.
So I'm waiting for our guests to join. Please maybe here close to me and leave the, yeah, okay.
Proszę wziąć mikrofon.
Mm-hmm. Hello? Yes, yes. So also I welcome also all who follow our discussion here in the European Parliament, in the Parliamentarium in Warsaw and also online. We have today a lot of issues, a lot of serious issues to discuss, and this is a very up-to-date topic. The European Union in times of geopolitical shift, state of play and perspectives. So I would like to welcome our guests online in Brussels, but connected with us thanks to, I don't know which technology, but it works. I hope it will work. So it's Mario Damen, a senior policy analyst in the Policy Foresight Unit of the European Parliament Research Service. He is the co-author of the study, The Future European Security Architecture, and he will present this for us today. Here I would also recommend you to look at the websites of the European Parliament. They have a very good research unit with a lot of very good and interesting papers. So there are other like Carnegie or so, but they seem to be more good on advertising what they are doing, while the Parliament is rather silent on this, I would say. But I have seen there a lot of very, very interesting analysis and papers. I welcome to the right of me Professor Anna Skolimowska from the Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński University in Warsaw. Her focus of her work is inter alia, there are relations between the EU and US, as well as the Eastern policy of the European Union. And Dr. Marta Pachocka from the Warsaw School of Economics and the Warsaw University, and her topics are mainly international politics and migration policy. Later in time will join us Juan Luis Balestros, the political analyst from the European Commission representation in Poland. You know that there is a Polish presidency in the Council ongoing, so all people who work here for the European Commission are very, very busy, but I hope he will join, or he must join us later, as the voice of the Commission is also very important. As regards my person, so I worked for over 20 years for the European Commission, mainly for DG Communication, and I am happy to be here in these premises again, as I worked, my last work here was in the European Commission. So this is as far as the introduction. So I would like Mario Damen now to take the floor.
Good morning to Warsaw. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, yes.
Good morning. Yes, I'm sitting in a medieval background, but I'm really speaking to you from the Brussels region, I can assure you. And thank you very much for inviting me and for giving me time to present some work of the, as you mentioned, the European Parliament Research Service. So what I would like to do in the coming 10 minutes is give you a flavor of two studies that we recently did on the perspectives side, on the future of the EU-Ukraine relations, and on the future European security architecture. Before I start presenting that, a few words on foresight. So these studies have been produced by using what we call foresight methodology. That means that we try to look beyond today and even beyond a couple of months into really like 5 to 10 to 15 years periods, by asking a lot of experts in the field how they see the future in these areas coming. And so I have a share screen here, and I hope you can all see it well. I understand there are television screens. I see it in the background. Good. So the first project, okay, there we go. First project is about EU-Ukraine relations. This is a project we did in 2022 and 2023. We had a big group of experts, 62 people involved, It included people from Ukraine, but also many European countries. And this led us to building scenarios, because when you talk about the future, we often do that through making scenarios. Now, I have very little time, so I'm going to jump immediately to the results. And the results of this study, first of all, the questions we asked ourselves. The questions at that time, the war was a couple of months old, was like, how will this war end? How will it go on? What will come after the war? Will there be reconstruction? Who will do the reconstruction? What about the membership of Ukraine, of the EU? How would a Ukrainian membership of the EU influence the nature of the EU? Would the EU be more what we call strategically autonomous? Would it have better chances to position itself in the world? And also at that time, we already asked ourselves whether there would be a certain level of competition maybe between the EU and the US. At that time, we mainly thought about the reconstruction process and who gets the contracts. But at the moment, of course, we are in a very difficult situation and a different situation as regards of that. Then we built these scenarios. So how do you do that? We were looking for what we call drivers of change. And one method that was used here is to put these drivers of change on axis. So on the horizontal axis, you see the Ukraine-Russia relationship, which we defined by the level of hazard. Hazard is a particular English word. We could have chosen the level of conflict or the level of tension, but we chose this word. And the vertical axis is the EU-Ukraine relationship, and we looked at the level of integration. And once you have your axis defined, you can see the scenario sort of naturally coming up. You can maybe not read everything, but to walk you through very quickly. So there is the green scenario, which we called fair stability, which is very positive for Ukraine. It means that they would recapture all their territory. There would be peace, of course. They would join the EU and even NATO. It's a maximum scenario. The opposite, the red scenario, we call it devastated Europe. There everything goes wrong. The war escalates, NATO gets involved, no membership of EU for Ukraine, maybe membership of the NATO, but only from a military perspective because they are at a war. And then there are in between these two other scenarios, the yellow and the blue ones. The yellow one is called Cold War II. The blue one was called frozen conflict. And these are the scenarios that are more, let's say, realistically close to where we are heading, or where it looks like we are heading for the moment, that the front line gets stuck, that some sort of negotiation starts. That will be a negotiation about territory. It will be a negotiation about memberships. What we did not foresee at the moment of that foresight exercise, and that shows you how difficult it is to do foresight, is the level of divergence between the EU and the US as we see it now. And what is still undecided now, I would say, is how that would work out with the security guarantees and the future status of Ukraine. This is now what is being negotiated between Russia, the US, and Ukraine. And that's why we did the second project. And the second project was sort of a follow-up where we focused on this geopolitical and military aspect. We had a smaller group of experts, but we came to a broader set of scenarios. Because now our questions were more like, how will the EU-US relationship evolve? How strongly might the US disengage itself from Europe? Because at the time of the Trump election, these interviews were held in the autumn of last year. It was already clear that we would see some changes. We didn't know how many changes, so we were exploring that. Then we were looking at questions like, if this relationship with the US changes, will NATO then still be the central organization of our security? Will it be a US-led NATO as we have known it? Or, and this is what we actually see happening now, will the focus of NATO shift towards Europe? Will it be more a French-UK-led NATO, which we call the European NATO? Or even the UK is now, let's say, on board in this European NATO model, but it's not self-evident that the UK would always do so because, for instance, nuclear deterrence is becoming more important again. The British nuclear deterrence is very strongly linked to the American one. It cannot even function on its own without American support. So there might also be a moment in time that the UK decides to side rather with the United States and no longer with the continental European states. So this is a scenario that we called EU Defense Union, where France would then become the central power because it's then the only nuclear power inside the EU. Of course, it can all go wrong. So we had a scenario where things fail. And in the end, we also wanted to have a positive scenario where we go to a new détente, where we go back to cooperation also with Russia. And in the long run, this is not excluded. So when you put that in a little picture, then you get this. The upper scenario, which you see in the middle, we called it antagonism. It's mainly a continuation of NATO as we know it, led by the United States, but in a very antagonistic world with clearly a Western bloc and an Eastern bloc. In the Eastern bloc, we imagine that Russia and China would stay very strongly together, maybe even China the senior partner in the relationship more than Russia. The second scenario, as I said, European NATO, where we considered that the US is strongly disengaging and that France and the UK take the lead of a reformed NATO, but they keep the organization of NATO. It doesn't necessarily mean also that the US has to step out of NATO. They could just formally stay a member, but simply no longer take the lead and no longer provide a certain level of security. The next level of further disengagement also from the UK is this EU Defense Union. We imagine that then maybe also Turkey might no longer join this organization because they are also not a member of the EU. And the scenario patchwork where it all falls apart. In the long run, this is a timing matter. Our experts thought this is a picture that could be valid for the next 10 years. If you want to go to détente, if you want to go back to a more cooperative coexistence, most experts thought, or the vast majority of experts thought, we need more time. We first have to go through these tensions, and then you need a trigger for détente. And we looked also quite a lot back into history. I can come back to that in the debate if you like, to see how détente in the 1960s and 70s, for instance, happened. And it happens often after a crisis, after the Cuba crisis, and because of economic costs. So, ending this, we wanted to come down from this bird's flight of foresight and looking into the future back to the present. And then we came to what we call policy considerations, which are for our policymakers. I summarized them very briefly here. On the one hand, US disengagement from Europe is, of course, a threat, but it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity for the EU and the European countries to become more independent. This is what we call EU strategic autonomy. That includes various aspects. That includes the strategic enablers, as we call it. This is a military term. So these satellites, air defense, nuclear protection, things that usually the US used to provide that we have to work on ourselves. This is about costs. This is the debate that's ongoing at the moment. Where does the money come from? And also where does it go to? Do you spend it in the United States or do you spend it in Europe? And finally, important to mention also, it's about national history and narratives. This is an important thing because when America steps back, when the United States are no longer here to keep the whole group together, also mentally, then a lot of old tensions happen to surface. And these are often rooted in history. So how much do European countries trust each other to take the leadership or a particular role in a military alliance. And you can think yourself of many examples. The final conclusion, NATO is an alliance, but not a security architecture. A security architecture should cover the whole of something, the whole area of Europe. And that means that a security architecture should include also Russia in one way or another. So if you want to come to détente, you have to have some sort of relationship, whether it's through the OSCE, whether it's through a bilateral relations, you have to have some structure and some mechanism to keep it all working. That was my very short introduction to these two studies that we did, and I'm happy to take questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mario, for this very in-depth analysis. And it's good to see that there are people who already before everything happened, what we see now, had the wisdom to to see what can come on the basis of the present developments, especially the shocking news from the US and the behavior of Donald Trump. How is your assessment where we are? So which scenario would be the most probable?
Yes, I take back here the slides with the scenarios. I would give a double answer. On the one hand, we don't like to say too much which scenario is the most probable, because the idea of making scenarios is that they should all have a certain likeliness and they should all be realistic. But if we look, on the other hand, at what's happening now, then we seem to move, at the moment, I would say, we seem to move towards this European NATO model, where the US does not formally leave NATO, they stay formally on board, but with a much smaller role. And we are working at the moment on the big challenges there, as I said, financially, but also organizationally and mentally. So for the moment, this looks as the most likely scenario. But as these scenarios are built on a 10-year horizon, things can change. Things change very much recently. And if, for instance, the ongoing talks on peace in Ukraine would fail in some way or another, we might easily slip into another scenario.
Thank you very much for this, and I would also like to come to what you mentioned about the lack of coherence in Europe's position, especially as there are different national policies. So, for instance, Prime Minister Sanchez said Putin will not cross the Alps. So it seems that the urgency of acting is maybe less in Spain than in Poland or in the Baltic states. How this could be overcome?
Yeah, thank you. That's indeed what I mentioned when I talked about the national narratives and the histories. I think Sanchez said he will not cross the Pyrenees, by the way. These are very profound things that are not so easily to work on. So I do not have a recipe how to solve this quickly, but we do note that these elements are coming back immediately when the United States steps back. What we see happening is that there are a lot of summits inside the European Union in the form of the European Council, but also in other formats, including the UK, including Ukraine, mainly in London and Paris at the moment. So it seems that talking to each other is one of the most important things to do at the moment. Talking to each other, openly discussing all the options, openly discussing all the risks, openly discussing all the challenges, but also opportunities that the current situation gives us, and also trying to jump over our shadows by discussing some things that were taboos shortly. The financial aspect in Germany, we had the Zeitenwende a couple of years ago. We seem to have a second Zeitenwende when we see how debt is now suddenly not so strictly regulated anymore in Germany. And I guess that we also need a sort of European Zeitenwende when we talk about the European defense industry, which is very fragmented nationally. And countries should maybe start to think how they can integrate their own defense industries into a larger European defense industry, which also makes a lot of efficiency gains. These are just some examples that I think that need to be discussed.
Thank you very much. Stay with us for further questions from the audience. And now I go to Professor Anna Skolimowska. What would be your comment? What are your thoughts on these issues?
Very much for the invitation at the beginning. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to discuss such an important issues both for us as Europeans, but also for the academics. I'm very happy to hear that you've conducted a surveys since 2022 and that you've been reflecting the situation in Europe. And on the other hand, we can see that the situation is so complex and so rapidly speeding, let me say, that even speaking about that and conducting a research is very let me say, risky, or even meets a lot of challenges. But when it comes to these scenarios the speaker presented at the beginning, it is, I can agree that the situation that Europe is in a kind of window of opportunity. When it comes to security issues, window of opportunity that was provoked by Russian aggression on Ukraine in 2022. We are all familiar that the plans of building European defense union, having European army, and the question what to do with the NATO and Americans were present in European public debate since the beginning of European project. Since the beginning, since the 50s, but due to the Americans and due to the differences between European states, I mean Europeans, we were not able to reach an agreement what we will do with our security. The agreement, of course, evolved with time, and the answer that Europe had for the world was her commitment to civilian and normative identity in the international relations that was supported by military engagement and military safety when it comes to NATO and American obligations. And now we are in a different momentum of European history. In my opinion, maybe it will be a kind of heresy that I will say, a kind of awakening for Europe, and a time that we came back to a realistic moment to think about our own interest, also in a security matters. And in my opinion, it is very risky to say that it will be taking place without United States, as our colleague said at the beginning. Many of the technologies, nuclear technologies, are mainly UK technologies, nuclear technologies, are dependent on Americans. So it is not easy to say that we can be angry on the United States and build European defense system or defense architecture without the United States. I see this process in a different way, that this is a time for Europe to build a kind of regional NATO with very strong industrial market, industrial facilities in the field of defense, of course. It is about money, as you've probably heard the speech of Ursula von der Leyen in the middle of March. She was talking mainly about the money, about the need to build and to reinvest in European defense system. So it is a moment for Europe to build its own industrial market, to invest more money in military issues, but in my opinion, still with kind of or within a NATO system. In other words, we cannot forget that still the United States are the provider of European security. And it was very tricky to hear about the Russians, as maybe I've understood it wrongly, that this new formula of European NATO will need a Russians inside.
Mario, it was a question to you.
No, that
Can
was
you?
not.
Oh, no?
It's not the case. The European NATO would not include Russia, but I said in the end, if you want to come to the cooperative coexistence scenario, so you have something overarching over the whole of Europe, then NATO itself cannot stretch that far, probably, and therefore NATO is an alliance, but not a security architecture.
Yes, why I am asking about that, because when we come back and move our minds into the middle of 2010 and 2013, when Vladimir Putin was traveling throughout Europe, he was offering European states an idea to build a huge European, let me say, common house from Lisbon to Vladivostok. And within that project, a strong military union was one of the points. Vladimir Putin said that Europe doesn't need NATO, that Russian army and Russian troops can secure Europe, that Russia can provide security to Europe instead of United States. So please be aware that it was Putin's idea to have Europeans closer to Russia and to build, of course, not only military union, but also monetary union, free trade area, common security, common energy market, and so on. So that's why I've asked a question, what does it mean? And this idea that Putin said and that I was referring to was also very close to one of the European generals from the time of early détente, as you've mentioned, General Charles de Gaulle. He was also very angry on Americans, and he said that we will build a strong Europe without the United States and maybe with a close cooperation with USSR. So the history is in some way very similar to that moment, but still please keep in mind that in my opinion, without United States, Europe won't be able to manage security threats. When we think about NATO and the history of that alliance, let's go back to 1949. It was built to overcome Soviet threat at times. And Russians are perceiving NATO, United States, and the whole West as something that is threatening their security. I'm not sure that they will be able, eager, willing to sit in one table with an institution that for the 70 years or 80 years from now is being seen as an antagonistic, very threatening for their own interest. And when commenting this, the current situation, I think it is all about the interests. We are moving back to the discussion on interest in international politics. Americans have their economic interest. They do not have much military interest in Europe. Yeah? They say that, Donald Trump says that we are more interested in doing business and securing our Americans' interest globally. Europe should think or rethink what is her interest nowadays. And in my opinion, it is very good that Europe is building her own military capabilities. Because it is in our interest to be strong, reliable, and to have this tool to act in accordance with the threats and to answer the threats rapidly. And we've been discussing that issue since the clash of communists since 1989, that Europe has to have a huge and reliable military strength to secure her interest in the world. But in my opinion, doing it outside the United States, it will be very, very risky for our own security. So it is a huge challenge how to manage and how to meet those two interests, Europeans to be secure and United States how to convince them that they still have an interest in secure Europe. Thank you.
Professor Skolimowska, now we have the Polish Council presidency, and the key motto of the presidency is security. What is your assessment of the first months of the Polish presidency in terms of what's going on against the background of the ongoing war in Ukraine and the radical shift in US policy?
Thank you for this question. Tomorrow we will be in the middle, on the 1st of April, we will be in the middle of the 6-month presidency period. And it wasn't easy time for the Polish authorities to tackle that issue for many reasons. First of all, due to the Donald Trump decisions and behavior towards the most important country nowadays in the world, I think, towards Ukraine, due to the situation in Russia and due to the shift, or let me say, due to the conflict that is still taking place and needs reactions both for the European Union and the world. Polish presidency is, in my opinion, active, not so much active as we would wish it to be in that topic, but as I've told you, the international agenda is somehow not easy for our authorities. What would be recommended? Let me answer to these questions like that. I think I would like our government to be more active in speaking about the need to Ukrainians steps towards European Union be taken in a more vivid way. So being advocate of Ukrainians' accessions to the European Union is very important and should be more often articulated by our authorities. It is taking place, but still we must talk about it. However, the situation, as I've told you, is very, very, as I can't say, is okay. Thank you very much. So the Polish presidency is also very active when it comes to discussing these military issues. Our Prime Minister was invited to London as a representative of a country that is holding a presidency, and he speaks loud and very strongly that Europe needs to take its obligation to build its own defense autonomy. So it is very clear, the message is very clear that we are in this coalition of the countries who are committed to build stronger, also in a military sense, Europe. The second thing I would comment that the Polish presidency also could be more active when it comes to speaking about the relations, the future relations with Russia. Yeah, now Russia is being seen as an aggressor and so on, but we must discuss deeply in Europe how to tackle with that country. how to behave as the war, I hope, will be ended or suspended in a near future. And also the third thing that is recommended from my point of view is also a question of Eastern policy as such. Eastern policy as such, what does it mean for Europe to have neighbors, to have new neighbors in case that Ukraine and maybe Moldova and Georgia in the future will join the European Union? What to do with the rest of those who will be outside the European Union, but still in between the new land. I mean, between Russia and between enlarged European Union. So these are the most important issues, in my opinion, are on the table of the Polish presidency. What is very in line with this Eastern and Central Eastern line of our foreign policy, and that is very paradoxical, let me say, or what is paradox in per se, is the situation of having this 3Cs initiative summit in Warsaw at the end of April.
Could you explain what this is? Because I think not everybody knows.
This is the initiative undertaken by the President of the Republic of Poland, the politician who is in some way an opposition for the governing party, and the scholars and analysts urged our presidency to organize a summit on European neighborhood policy, on Eastern partnership during the presidency. There's no such initiative. Our government is not taking this opportunity to speak aloud in Europe that we have a domaine réservé that is called Eastern policy, that this should be our main priority when it comes to the foreign policy, while the presidential palace is organizing at the end of April the summit. I mean, it's in a broader formula, the 3Cs initiative, and is saying that one of the institution, maybe namely the presidential palace, is involved in Central and Eastern issues in Poland. So what I am trying to say, that the more cooperation between government, between presidency, between presidential palace is recommended to speak about Eastern issues that I perceive are at our main interest in foreign policy. So we know that this initiative is being perceived by government as something not important, but still there will come to Poland many representatives of Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Armenia, and the Central Eastern countries. So it will be a kind of huge event that is not taking place within the formula of the Polish presidency. So what I would recommend is a dialogue between two parties in Poland for sake of Polish interest in foreign policy.
Thank you very much. Of course, this would be very welcomed, but all of us also know that there are ongoing presidential elections in Poland in May. And of course, many political issues are de facto very, very sensitive. But anyway, I think it's very important what you said about don't forget the Eastern Partnership, because what we see now with developments going on in Georgia, for instance, yes, and there should be a strong voice of the European Union, stronger support. This Eastern Partnership initiative seemed to have a bit vanished. Yes. But I think maybe the real reason is that we are very much absorbed by the war, and the war is ongoing. Nobody knows how when it will end, and so there are other very pressing political issues on the agenda.
On the agenda, but also in the region. In the region, look at the Armenia, look at Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is became very close to Russia because of Europe's lack of interest. So it might be a country that will be out of the formula of Eastern Partnership because it will choose to cooperate with Russia because of a better or more profitable programs, political programs, and so on. So Europe, Poland, in my opinion, cannot forget about the Eastern Partnership and Eastern region. So we all know that the war is very horrible, and it is in our interest to keep our minds, thoughts, and efforts on that. But still, there are many problems in that region. Not only in Georgia, we've been discussing the issue, for example, of Romanian elections, what is taking place there. So we do have a life outside Ukraine.
So we have a topic for the next discussion here.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I would like to welcome Juan Luis Balestros. He is political counselor and political analyst in the European Commission representation here in Warsaw. So welcome that you are here with us. But first, I will give the floor to Marta Pachocka from the Economic University in Warsaw and the Warsaw University. So you have a broad scope of topics on your agenda. So I would like ask you for your comments.
Thank you very much, and I'm happy to be here, especially today as a Team Europe Direct expert, and we have this great opportunity always to cooperate with our colleagues, experts from other fields. So this was a very interesting exercise to follow my previous colleagues contributing to this discussion about the EU, the current geopolitical shift and what we have today and what the future might be. So what comes to my mind from these two contributions, very up to date and very important. These are issues like security, industry, economy, budget, defense, and especially interest of national states. So I'm just considering how I should address these topics, taking into account my expertise that is since around 10 years mostly focused on migration studies at the EU level and especially in Poland as a member state. So maybe I would say that we should, even in this very complex period where this hard power is so valid, still you should think about soft components. But soft components, it does not mean that they do not matter. So I would say that we should not forget about human dimension and legal dimension. What I mean by this? I mean the people, the societies, but also the legal framework responsible, for example, for addressing some humanitarian and asylum-related topics, but also resilience of these societies. Why this framework? Because as my colleague said, in fact, she said, please keep Eastern Partnership in your mind. It's not only as in the title about the EU with this importance of the US, if the US is a good boy or enfant terrible. What really matters is the three-actor play. So from one side we have the EU, from the other side we have the EU member states including Poland, and finally it's Ukraine. So from this perspective we should think very broadly. And here comes this humanitarian factor and people themselves, because it's very important to think about the future scenarios in terms of security and how we should be prepared for example, for the possible war. And especially these two middle scenarios were considered by the first speakers, so Cold War and frozen conflict. But still, What does it mean for people, especially for the Ukrainian society, but also for European societies, and how they are prepared to receive, for example, large-scale forced migration from the country that is affected by war. Few numbers, because numbers are more specific, and it makes something that is abstract, like, you know, people, the war, the victims, more concrete. So what is the current state of play in terms of these human issues and the war developments going on in Ukraine, and the response of the EU member states? So if we look at the most recent data from UNHCR website, operational data portal, the number of refugees from Ukraine, so Ukrainian nationals, but also other third country nationals that are, as of today, recorded globally, this is almost 7 million people. Then, if we narrow this number only to broadly understood Europe, because this is UN agency, so we are not purely focused on the EU, this is 6.3 million. And what is the situation with Poland? With Poland, we remember that Poland was the main host country in 2022. This is for different reasons, including the very long land border with Ukraine of 335 kilometers. So, according to the data that were provided to UNHCR website for Poland, this was mid-January 2025. Refugees recorded from Ukraine in Poland, it was around 998,000, so below million, but still this is a very valid number, and it refers mostly to those people that were granted in Poland temporary protection, and to be more precise, they received, because they do not have to apply for temporary protection, they became beneficiaries of the so-called temporary protection, mostly based on the national law on assistance that is connected to the EU TPD from 2001. So this is the first number, below 1 million. Then we have the number of refugees from Ukraine who applied for asylum, TP, or similar national protection schemes in Poland. So the total accumulated number from the beginning of the full-scale war, it's almost 2 million. So the total number of those that were in Poland as beneficiaries of protection that applied, and also those that are still there. But then we have also very interesting numbers that matter, especially in terms of borders. And we know that now border issues, border management is a very hot topic, especially in Poland. So border crossings from Ukraine to Poland and from Poland to Ukraine since 24 February 2022. From Ukraine to Poland in early 2025, 27.5 million. And the outflow from Poland to Ukraine, 25.5 million. What does it mean? So it does not mean that 27 million Ukrainian nationals and other third country nationals moved to Poland and stay here. It also does not mean that 25.5 million people left Poland and returned to Ukraine. This is just about the flow. So this just shows us what is the scale of this human mobility between the two countries, and it matters a lot. But it also shows us what is the balance between the two numbers, around 2 million. So does it mean that we have precisely 2 million Ukrainians living now in Poland under TP? Not, because we know from other data I've mentioned this is around 1 million. But it shows the scale. And the scale was even better seen in the first 3 weeks of 2022, when we looked how the numbers of people moving from Ukraine or fleeing Ukraine to Poland were increasing. This was around 3.7 million in early March. This was the scale. So now the question is, what will happen depending on the scenarios that were today put on the table based on the research? We have no idea. So obviously we can try to forecast. There are, we know well the population projections by different international and EU bodies. The population projections till 2023, 2050, and so on. And yes, it's important, but they are credible in times of peace. But it's not so easy to provide credible projections if we have no idea what will be the real demographic situation and the geopolitical situation. However, what we can do as the EU member states and the EU and the societies is to be prepared for different scenarios. So not to be over-optimistic. I think that now we are not so much optimistic because of the US-connected developments, and we are more realistic. That is good, because this is how, in fact, the logic, international logic works. It's still based mostly on national interests and nation states, not so much on intergovernmental organizations, which is bad, because these EGOs can make a lot of good work as the EU or other UN agencies. So how and what should we do? We should think as the EU about internal safety, so civil protection mechanisms for sure, be prepared for it, but on the other hand, should be also prepared in terms of humanitarian aid. So we should increase our humanitarian aid capacities, also reception capacities. We can say we did it in 2022, mostly the neighboring countries with Ukraine, but what was the price? We see now the price. The price is up especially at the level of the societies and how the social attitudes are, how they look like now. So for example, in Poland, if we compare the social attitudes, what Polish think about, let's say, Ukrainians and supporting them, this is not so optimistic and supportive as it was in 2022, even 2023. So this is also about the people once again. So as you see, safety, everything what was said is crucial and very important, not my field of expertise. But then migration is mostly about the people in different aspects. So we have to know how to be prepared to manage the risk of very high migration flows, mostly of forced natures in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marta. Indeed, I think for the Ukrainian people, it's extremely difficult to decide now what to do, because there are still no signs that this war will end soon. And I remember that after 1945, also these decisions were very difficult to make for Poles, because there were some people who were in detention centers there outside of Poland, and they had to decide go back to the communist Poland or find another way. By the way, the US and the Western countries very much encouraged those people to go back to the communist Poland. It's an interesting issue of history. Well, so now I go to the European Commission. Luis Balestros, how the European Commission reacted and what initiatives have been launched in answer to this radical shift of US policy towards the relations with the EU, both in terms of security policy and trade relations.
So thank you, Marjana. Thank you, Kinga, for the invitation. And I feel like an airplane. You know, in the airports, when you are delayed, the first plane, the second plane is delayed, then the third plane. So I'm very late today, and I apologize for that. But we were accumulating delays for the meetings today, many of them about Ukraine, about the situation. So it was very interesting. And on defense, I wanted to make just a few comments, not to present the white paper, because it is very complicated and the real experts are in Brussels. But the white paper that was presented on 19th March is our response to the defense challenges we have. But this is nothing new in the sense. It's new what we propose, how we propose to do things, but it's not new the concept. If we think about the concept of strategic autonomy, we go back to the 90s. So we have been always talking about the possibility or the goal to have a Europe who is strategically independent, autonomous. I don't know if you remember, after Brexit, there was a period of reflection under the Juncker Commission. And this period of reflection started with a white paper of what kind of European Union we want. And in this reflection, there was a reflection paper on defense. And I remember, and it's interesting to see in this reflection paper that there are some references to the kind of defense that we could have in 2025. Now we are in 2025, and we still didn't do our homework yet. So that's, to put it very very clear. In that paper, it was reflected, it was showcased all the problems we had with, not only with the investment, but with the coordination. So we are not efficient when it comes to spending in defense. We have too many models of tanks, too many models of jets, we don't have interoperability at the level we should have. Military mobility is also a pending issue, many things. And we don't have a single market on defense equipment, no? And this was already said 8 years ago. We go to the white paper now, it doesn't say it, it puts the means to overcome these challenges. So the white paper is an attempt by the institutions to offer member states all the avenues, all the benefits of being members of the Union, so they can use it to improve the defense capabilities. What for? I guess I got late, but I think we spoke, or it has been said already here, the geopolitical situation is as it is. So the sense of urgency is not for free. But here, I'd like to make a point also. Well, in the white paper, we have some financial instruments encouraging member states to spend more in defense. We have some proposals to build a single market on the defense equipment. And we have also, we are providing member states with the possibility to escape our fiscal rules a little bit, 1.5%, up to 1.5% of GDP to spend more on defense. But this is what we can offer. Then the work has to be done by member states. We can offer joint procurements, we can offer many things at the European level. Well, when it comes to defense, we are talking about very national markets. Every army has its own suppliers, and normally these are national suppliers, which means it's difficult to have aggregating demand. It's difficult to open it to the benefits of the single market. So these inefficiencies that we saw in 2017 are difficult to overcome, but this is an attempt to do that. The white paper also identifies a number of critical capability areas. We talk about air and missile defense, ammunition, drones, many things which are to be operational already. The difference with 2017, in 2017 we talked on the European, when we launched the European Defense Fund, we talked about research and the development of prototypes. You see the different thinking, no? We were thinking, okay, in the future we could have a common defense or develop our defense, and now we are saying, no. We want it for the end of April. We want it for the summer, because the world changed and changed very, very quickly. No? In this context, I would like to ask you one thing, although it's difficult here when we are talking on this setting. But for you, how many of you think that the main problem in Europe is security and defense? How many of you? If we are in Poland, I could tell you that this is the first preoccupation, the first concern of Polish citizens. But if I go to Spain, my home country, it's the fourth or the fifth. If we go to Italy, it's again the fourth or the fifth. Croatia, also the fourth or the fifth. And that's a challenge, because the perception of the threat is not the same in the whole Union. We will have now European governments having to increase the defense spending, sometimes reopening their budgets. The case of Spain, for instance, there is no budget for 2025, it's extended for 2024. The coalition government, some parties are in favor of increasing the defense expenditure, other parties are against, and the government is in minority. So this is a problem to overcome. But here, Europe is asking for solidarity. No? The narrative in Spain is very clear. You were helped during the pandemic because the Spanish economy suffered very much, and now we need your help. No? This is the narrative, and this happens also in Italy. No? In Italy, we have there are some opposition parties already asking for public consultation on this, because it's a very sensitive thing, and it's very important to communicate well that we are getting ready, so we are not attacked. So we are a peace organization. We want peace, but we don't. We need to prepare ourselves in case there is a threat in case there is an attack. So nobody in the end attacks us. So the first point is that these difficulties are in the capitals that we'll have to see
Excuse
that.
me, may I jump in with a question, because we have what is common between Italy, Spain, Poland is the single market. So we have a lot of investments from Italy, from Spain and Poland. A lot of Polish people buy properties in Spain. So de facto, how would you judge on this? Because I think that we are thinking still in very national paradigms, but the issue is that we are already very much economically connected. So it's not like before the Second World War, yeah?
It's a question of perception. If you go there, you feel it. If you go to Spain, you feel that Russia is very far. We don't feel this threat. If you go to Poland, you feel it. It's on the news, it's everywhere, and it's a matter of perception. And public opinion, it moves with perception, and we have to work and to make people, to inform people that we are a union. And what you said is very true. It's we are so intertwined that yes, we are together. We are at a level of integration that there is no comeback. There is no comeback. So we need to be ready, to be solid, yes, to be generous and to understand the problems who are other problems, but also could be ours, no? But because geography is different in the union, no? But it's like that. It's the perception thing. And then we also have a problem. Well, we said that we talk about effectiveness and coordination, and this national identity of the defense markets is very important also, and it will be difficult to overcome. But the white paper is already giving some avenues to have joint procurements, to open and to start building a single market on defense. Military mobility. Well, we have, there are some points there that we could be raised, but the main thing I would say is that this is a tool for member states to increase their expenditure. It should be done very, very fast. There are political obstacles that need to be overcome very soon, and in the end, it will be a matter of political will. So that's for defense. You asked me about the measures we're taking, and I would say this is a constructive measure. No? As I told you in the beginning, already in 2017 we were talking about this. Already under Obama administration, there was a shift of focus from Europe to Indo-Pacific region. So we were getting this trend. What is happening now is an acceleration, a very big acceleration. But we were on this track already. When it comes to trade, the measures we are taking tomorrow on trade, these are reactions. No, I guess you know about the tariffs that has been imposed by the U.S. administration on steel and aluminium, the tariffs that were announced about cars, and reciprocal tariffs also. One thing about these tariffs is nobody knows exactly what they look like until they are imposed. They are announced, but nobody really knows until they are imposed. Our response to that is not extending the suspension of our tariffs that were expiring today. So there was a package of tariffs which were suspended on steel and aluminum, I think also, but at least there is a list of goods from the US, and they will not be extended. So tomorrow they will enter into force, and a second package is being discussed for the 12th of April. And this regards the first tariffs that were introduced by the US administration at the beginning of March. The new tariffs, again, we had some statements from the president last week that we will study that and we will explore further measures. What are the tariffs? For us, tariffs are taxes which are imposed on the citizens and businesses that can also increase inflation. And our objective with the tariffs from the European Union is to rebalance trade with the US, also to incentivize the other part to lift the tariffs and leave a space for negotiations. We don't like tariffs. We believe in free trade, but we also are here to defend the interest of the European citizens and businesses. So this is our reaction, and as soon as the new tariffs are imposed, I think 2nd of April, we will see which is our reply.
2nd of April.
From the US, yes. Ours is tomorrow. The US, they were announced for 2nd of April, I think.
Thank you very much. So thank you to all of our interlocutors here. And we start now the Q&A session. So also we encourage to ask questions for those who follow us online. So please raise your hand and also introduce yourself. And maybe just if you could add to whom this question is directed. Thank you.
Yeah, hello, I'm here. My name is Renata and I'm a first year international relations student, and I have a question to Sir Maria Damon. You mentioned that in the security architecture, Russia should be included in one way or another. So I just wanted to ask you, could you expand on that, and how exactly do you see that happening? Do you see that like as a bigger alliance, a treaty? Do you think there will be a space for demilitarization of Russia in that case? Thank you.
Mario, so the floor is yours again.
Yes, I hope people can see me on screen. This question seems to come back, so I must be clear that in only one of the 5 scenarios, we say that we need this stronger cooperation with Russia, and in the other 4, it is less likely to happen. We deliberately chose the word security architecture to show that it is something very large and encompassing. And there are various ways to get there. Maybe also in reaction to Professor Skolimovska, you spoke about these pan-European initiatives of Russia or of the Soviet Union, and we had many in the past. It started already in the 60s. We had the common European home of Gorbachev. Medvedev came with these ideas. So there have been indeed a range of suggestions from the part of the Soviet Union or Russia to come to a pan-European structure, and they never really happened because not all parties could agree on how it should be developed. The thing that comes closest to that is the CSCE, the Conference for Security and Cooperation in Europe, that then became the OSCE in 1994. And probably we have to build on what's left of that. At the moment, the OSCE is quite powerless because it's built on consensus and unanimity. And if one country doesn't play ball, then the whole system no longer works. But we should also draw the lessons from the past. And one of the lessons that all the experts told us is that you need, if you speak about disarmament and arms control, you really need much better inspections. So I wouldn't immediately want to jump to the ideal of a pan-European organization where everybody is in on an equal footing, because that is probably rather unlikely. But what we were talking about with the word architecture is that we will somewhere in the future have to make a bridge again from the very antagonistic situation of today to a more cooperative way of working, which probably has to involve new agreements on arms control, new agreements maybe even on disarmament, but then accompanied with much stronger mechanisms for inspections so that the mutual level of trust increases, because there was a lot of lack of trust, and that lack of trust has only been increasing since the 2000s, you could say. How the precise situation of Russia is, we don't know. In the Ukraine study, we had various scenarios, and one of them includes indeed a sort of disorganization from Russia in case of a defeat that would have a heavy impact on the country. At the moment, it does not look like something in that direction is going to happen, but we don't know. But when we take the assumption that Russia as a state will continue, then I think we have to think in terms of this architecture. I hope that explains. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mario. So now this lady in the blue skirt, please.
Good afternoon. Jaroslava Budzikiewska, first year master student from the University of Warsaw. My question is directed to Anna Skolimowska. I was wondering, how do you imagine new Eastern partnership that you're referring to? Because parts of Moldova, Ukraine, Georgia are all occupied by Russia. Belarus is not even discussed in this framework, while, as you mentioned, Azerbaijan and Georgia both have not pro-European ideas currently. And do you envision as another attempt of European Union to invest to maybe get something pro-European, some pro-European initiatives as a result of this investment, or rather do you envision it as just counteracting Russian initiatives and trying to get a certain influence, and how it would be possible without hard power being applied?
Thank you very much for that question. Please allow me to refer to Mr. Mario Damen and just to have a small historical remark, as you've been talking about OECD. Let me remind you that OECD was, of course, rebuilt in 1995, but originally it was established in 1975 as a conference of cooperation and security in Europe, and it was kind of Soviet diplomatic project. It wasn't a project that Europe invented, let me say. It was something that Soviet diplomacy asked Europe to join to discuss European security issues together. Russia, I mean Soviet Union, that days needed a formula of credible diplomatic institution to show during the detente time that she's ready and open to discuss about European issues, I mean security issues that days. And the history repeats, in my opinion, because that days, I mean in 1970s, the one who was advocate of this Soviet idea in Europe was Poland. Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Adam Rapacki, said this, I mean, invited Western politicians to join, to be open for that proposal, to accept Soviets' invitation. So maybe these days the history will repeat. Maybe the Russia will see the need to discuss with us the security, the economic issues, but let me...
excuse me, I see that there is a lot to talk between
Yes.
you and Mr.
A lot of-
Damen.
yes, we need to have
so
a Zoom in
we should exchange,
conversation.
but we would
Yes,
like to
yes.
put the floor to the question, so maybe
of
you
course.
could focus.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much, and sorry for this omission. But I wanted to say that we had a lot of things in past that we can use today and think about them. So only I'm sorry. So going back to your question, when it comes to this new or going even back to the idea of Eastern Partnership. As we are thinking about that project, it was, of course, economic project, you know, a political invitation for these countries, but foremost, it was a kind of ideological, in my opinion, battle between two spheres, between Russian influences in the region and European aspirations of the countries involved in that project, the 6 countries that were very close at that times to the European Union, and that they wanted to be a part of another project than the Russian sphere. So, and the weakness of this answer from the part of the European Union, that this being pointed by scholars and also by the political elites of the countries, was that the European Union had nothing more than economy, nothing more than dialogue, a parliamentary dialogue, civil society dialogue. These countries needed to have very clear information from Europe that Europe wants them as a partners, that Europe wants them to be a member state. But the formula of Eastern Partnership and the more broader European neighborhood policy excluded that idea. It was everything, like the European Commission said, it was everything but accession. So when I'm thinking about the new European neighborhood or Eastern Partnership, we must think about the program that will give the countries cooperating within that formula a clear signal. We want you in Europe. We want you to be the partners in the future in, I don't know, 10 or 20 years. Without that, still we will have this fight, economic, political fight between the countries, between Russian Federation's interests and European interests in the Central or even Eastern Europe. So the new partnership as something credible, as something very communicative for the countries and grounded in the commitment that we would like you to be a full partners of the European countries. Is it possible? We know that this is very difficult, but maybe it will be the only way to avoid conflicts in that region. So thank you.
Thank you. But in relation to Ukraine and Moldova, I think this clear answer has been already given by the EU, and there are talks ongoing and which are provided by the European Commission. So the next question, please.
Remigiusz Skierski from Warsaw School of Economics. Thank you for this very interesting debate. You are talking about the strategic autonomy in terms of military, but I'm curious whether it is possible to be autonomous without our economy that will be competitive, as Draghi pointed out in his report. So shouldn't we focus more on, for example, capital markets union or other solutions that will unite us in terms of economy? And also the question to the representative of the Commission, at what stage is the implementation of main takeaways from the report? Thank you.
Thank you. And it's very interesting because when we talk about tariffs, for instance, I remember last week we had a minister, Domański, Polish minister Domański, on behalf of the presidency, talking about this, and he was saying something which, for me, it resonated a lot, that we shouldn't look that much at what is going on with the tariffs from the US, and focus on this, on our economy and completing single market, capital markets, and we have many gaps there, which cost immensely more than the tariffs. So yes, we have. I cannot answer to the steps for the implementation because, as Margena knows, we are policy analysts here, but there is a broad spectrum of policy. But yes, they go together. The thing with the white paper is that we are touching gaps, our main gaps. And the main gaps are the military. This is our weak point. The EU is a superpower, economic superpower in the world. Our soft power is also very strong, but the hard power is not that much. And we are leading towards a world where hard power is very, very important, more and more important. The peace dividend we lived from since the end of the Second World War is over. And now we need to do our homework. That's also, we need to know that the low investment in defense, it comes from also a high investment in other areas that we could afford thanks to having this security umbrella. But first things first, as in Poland, the Eurobarometer showed this concern about security and defense, which is an existential thing. So yes, we need to focus on the economy, and yes, we need to focus on defense.
Thank you, Juan. There are a lot of people following us online. Could you give us now, Anya, some insight on what are the questions?
So, hello. We have two questions from the internet, and the first one is, in what ways can the EU strengthen its political and economic cohesion to navigate current geopolitical challenges such as the war in the Ukraine or energy crisis? And the second is, what strategies does the EU employ to ensure access to the key resources such as water and other natural resources used in the defense industry?
Okay, thank you. So I would ask maybe Marta Pachocka, who is from an economic university, so to ask these questions.
So I will address the first question, because even if I'm from economics field, last 10 years I'm much more political scientist in migration field. So let me not elaborate on defense, as I said that this is not my field. And obviously the issues regarding to Ukraine are valid for all of us. So the cohesion, if I understand correctly, the question that you've shared with us is about our resilience to some extent, our socioeconomic preparedness, and this cohesion. Cohesion is there. I mean, we have something that we call regional cohesion policy. There are very specific tools, very specific funds, and we know that they work well, and it applies both to this intra-EU cooperation, so cross-border cooperation, let's say, inside, but we have also special funds and different funding schemes for this cooperation, let's say, at the outside of the EU member states with third countries. And here comes this cross-border cooperation, for example, between, I don't know, Poland and Ukraine. We know many examples from the past. So what to do? So once again, my feeling today here, having all the three speeches heard, is that I do not fit so much, because what really matters, as you said, and with what I have to agree, is this hard component. This is the sad reality, that even if we ask ourselves about resilience, humanitarian issues, legal, being legally correct, and so on, still this is this even socioeconomic cohesion that we understand in hard terms. So, for example, to what extent and how maybe the EU should reorganize its different funding schemes under different policies to support. Now the question is what? So I think that the socio-economic cohesion should be focused on, to some extent, quick, as you say, very quick now, chain of decisions and revisions of the priorities. So these priorities are to show us what are the socio-economic priorities, so what we should focus on. So maybe not so much on the environmental issues. So maybe Green Deal is not the main focus in, in this aspect. Maybe we should much more be focused on logistics, on transport, on infrastructure. So that's the question, what our internal priorities should be shaped, but it's not only about what we have inside, this is also what we have outside. And when we were elaborating and the questions were asked, for example, about Eastern Partnership, so if this is doable or not doable, it does not matter so much how we will call the policy framework that we are applying to specific regions. So in this case of neighborhood policy, we say Eastern Partnership. It was valid, let's say, 10 years ago. Now the reality is different. So we need maybe new policies or new names of these policies. Let me give you an example. Something that is not dedicated one-to-one to region called Neighborhood East. This is something much broader, mostly focused on Africa, Latin America, Caribbean, and so on. This is Global Gateway. This is Global Gateway, and it has both these soft and hard components, how it is oriented. So there is about, I don't know, gender mainstreaming, gender equality, and so on, because this is part of our EU core values. But there is also about environmental focused activities, but also this hard component, so transport and infrastructure. So we see that the EU knows how to reorganize its priorities, and it is followed by the money. And the money are very often targeted to outside partners, and Ukraine, Georgia, other Eastern Partnership countries are a good example, because we have many founding schemes, very specific, that contribute to support, once again, what I've mentioned before, societies, so to shape our capacity building, to create these soft links, I don't know, in higher education, in societies, to strengthen our resilience.
Thank you. Juan, you would like to add something?
Yeah, to add something, we have to be aware that we are not only facing conventional threats, but hybrid threats. That means that hybrid attack is the attack that takes form without invading your territory. It can be in many ways, disinformation, cyber attacks. And there, too, we have a window of opportunity to invest more on defense. Also, defense capabilities are capabilities that can be used afterwards for civil purpose. So I wouldn't say it's hard or soft. I wouldn't exclude one from the other, because it's just an understanding that we need to focus on defense also, but in a way, for instance, for promoting dual-use items, dual-use infrastructure, things that in the worst scenario we can use to defend ourselves, but also that have a benefit for the society itself. I don't think we have to renounce to who we are, because otherwise we wouldn't have anything to defend. So the rule of law, our principles and values, this is how we are here. And another thing is, I read last weekend, there was an article in April 2024 about NATO as a driver for democracy. And it was very interesting. It was the 75th anniversary of NATO. And it was talking, basically saying that security and democracy, they go together. And extending NATO benefited very much those states, because they could develop democracy and freedom and rule of law. So there was values attached. And what is NATO? NATO is hard power. So I would say, yes, we have to focus on defense, but with a purpose, with economic sense. Also, when in the white paper it's written the possibility to use cohesion funds or EU instruments to finance defense. Why? Because in a region, if you open a factory, defense factory, whatever equipment, you have many employments. There is a market, so you are boosting the region. So I would say it's looking at things from a different perspective, more comprehensive, bearing in mind the threats we have ahead of us.
Thank you very much. And as always at this type of conferences, we are running out of time, so we have no room more for additional questions. Nevertheless, I would like to ask all students, all who asked questions and who participated in this event, and many thanks to Mario Damen in the European Parliament in Brussels. The European Parliament office in Warsaw will provide you, on request, of course, with the link to this big study, but very interesting study. Thank you very much to Professor Anna Skolimowska. I see that it's a good also opportunity to start exchange with the analysts of European Parliament. Many thanks to Dr. Marta Pachowska, and of course to my former colleague Juan Ballesteros from the European Commission. So thank you very much for your attention, and I give the floor now to Kinga Schlesinger.
Thank you very much. Yes, I know that you still have questions. Please ask them during the lunch. And as Marzena said, we will send the links to Mario's analysis via email, and they will be also attached to the recordings on YouTube and Facebook. Thank you for being with us. Thank you to all those who contributed to today's event. Thank you, Marzena, and thank you, panel. Thank you. And I invite everybody. We invite for lunch, and where we can continue our discussions. Thank you, Mario. Thank you. Bye.